Have you ever had the strange feeling that someone knew something about you they should never have known? Not your friends. Not your family. Not even the people you work with. Something much deeper. Something much more disturbing. Maybe they knew exactly when you left your house. Maybe they knew what room you spent the most time in. Maybe they knew details that you never posted online. And maybe, just maybe, that uneasy feeling you've been ignoring is connected to something hidden right in front of you. Because tonight, we are talking about a reality that sounds like science fiction but exists all around us. A reality that has shocked investigators, terrified homeowners, and exposed secrets nobody thought could be discovered. What if I told you that some of the smallest objects in your life could be hiding something unexpected? What if the very item you look at every day could be looking back at you? Stay with me until the end because the final story is so unbelievable that when investigators first heard it, they thought it had to be fake. But it wasn't. And after hearing it, you may never look at ordinary objects the same way again. Imagine this. You walk into your bedroom. Everything looks normal. The furniture hasn't moved. The windows are locked. Nothing seems out of place. But what you don't know is that a tiny lens, no bigger than a shirt button, is quietly recording everything. Not making a sound. Not blinking. Not revealing itself. Just watching. Waiting. Collecting. Every movement. Every conversation. Every private moment. Now here's the terrifying part. The lens isn't hidden where most people would look. It's not behind a painting. It's not inside a clock. It's not even attached to a wall. Instead, it's hidden inside something so ordinary that your eyes pass over it hundreds of times without suspicion. A device that seems completely harmless. Something that belongs there. Something you trust. And that is exactly why it's so effective. The greatest hiding place isn't darkness. It's familiarity. People expect danger to look dangerous. But the things that truly shock us often look completely normal. Years ago, security experts conducted an experiment. They placed tiny hidden cameras around a room and invited volunteers inside. The volunteers were told cameras were present. They knew they were being tested. They actively searched. They checked shelves. They checked furniture. They inspected decorations. Most failed. Even when they knew cameras existed, they couldn't find them. Think about that. If people struggle to locate something they're actively searching for, how likely are they to notice something when they're not searching at all? That's what makes this topic so fascinating. And so unsettling. Because awareness changes everything. Now let me tell you about a case that still sends chills down people's spines. A man moved into a rented apartment. Nothing seemed unusual. The place looked clean. Modern. Comfortable. For months, life went on normally. Then strange things began happening. Someone seemed to know details about his schedule. Deliveries arrived at odd times. Conversations somehow found their way back to people who should never have heard them. At first, he dismissed it. Coincidence. Bad luck. overthinking. Until one evening, while cleaning a shelf, he noticed something unusual. A tiny reflection. Just for a second. A flash. The kind of flash most people would ignore. But curiosity made him investigate. And what he found changed everything. Hidden within an everyday household object was a tiny camera. Perfectly positioned. Perfectly concealed. And perfectly capable of observing the room. The object had blended into the environment so naturally that nobody questioned it. Not guests. Not visitors. Not even the person living there. Months had passed. And nobody noticed. Now imagine discovering that. Imagine realizing that something ordinary had been silently observing your life. Would you ever trust that room again? Would you ever look at that object the same way? Probably not. Because once the illusion is broken, you begin seeing things differently. And that's where the real mystery begins. You see, hidden surveillance isn't frightening because of technology. Technology is neutral. What's frightening is the realization that appearances can be deceptive. That certainty can be an illusion. That the thing you never questioned may deserve a second look. Throughout history, humanity has been fooled by assumptions. We assume a locked door means safety. We assume a familiar face means trust. We assume an ordinary object is exactly what it appears to be. Most of the time, those assumptions are correct. But every now and then, reality reminds us that certainty isn't guaranteed. And those moments stay with us. Because they force us to question what we thought we knew. Now let me tell you about another strange incident. A woman began noticing that her pet behaved oddly in one corner of her house. Every day. Same corner. Same reaction. The animal would stare. Freeze. And refuse to move. Weeks passed. Then months. Nobody understood why. Until an inspection revealed something unexpected hidden within a common household item. The discovery explained everything. The unusual behavior. The strange feeling. The persistent sense that something wasn't right. What shocked investigators wasn't just the hidden device. It was the location. Because nobody expected it. Nobody. And that's the lesson repeated again and again. The most surprising hiding places are often the ones hiding in plain sight. Not because they're invisible. But because they're familiar. Human attention is selective. We notice change. We notice movement. We notice things that don't belong. But we often ignore things that appear normal. That tendency helps us navigate life efficiently. Yet it also creates blind spots. And blind spots can be powerful. Now here's something even more fascinating. Researchers studying human observation discovered that people can miss obvious details when focused on something else. Entire objects. Entire events. Even things happening directly in front of them. It's called inattentional blindness. And it proves something extraordinary. Seeing isn't always noticing. You can look directly at something and still fail to recognize it. Think about that. How many objects are around you right now? How many have you truly examined? How many have become part of the background? Most. Probably almost all. Because familiarity creates invisibility. And invisibility creates opportunity. This is why some of history's most surprising discoveries happened when someone noticed what everyone else ignored. A small detail. A strange reflection. An unusual placement. Something tiny. Something seemingly meaningless. Until it wasn't. Now we're approaching the part of this story that few people forget. A security consultant was called to inspect a property after repeated reports of unusual activity. Nothing concrete. Just feelings. Suspicions. Small inconsistencies. The kind people often dismiss. The consultant spent hours searching. Nothing. Everything appeared normal. Then one detail stood out. A single object positioned in a way that didn't make sense. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just slightly unusual. The object seemed ordinary. Completely harmless. But after closer examination, investigators uncovered something shocking. A hidden camera concealed within the item itself. The reason nobody noticed it? Because people stopped seeing it years earlier. It had become part of the environment. Invisible through familiarity. And that's perhaps the most important idea in this entire story. The things we stop noticing often have the greatest power over our attention. Not because they're dangerous, but because they disappear from conscious awareness. Now I want you to think about your own surroundings. Not with fear. Not with paranoia. But with curiosity. Look around. How many objects do you truly notice? How many have become background scenery? How many have you stopped questioning? The answer may surprise you. Because the world is filled with details we overlook every day. And sometimes those overlooked details hide extraordinary stories. Stories that remain undiscovered until someone pays attention. Until someone notices the reflection. The placement. The inconsistency. The clue. And that brings us to the final revelation. The most shocking discovery isn't that hidden cameras can exist. It's that the human mind can overlook something sitting in plain sight for months, years, or even decades. The greatest disguise isn't technology. It's normality. The greatest hiding place isn't secrecy. It's familiarity. And the greatest mystery isn't what's hidden. It's why we fail to notice it. Tonight, before you go to sleep, take one careful look around your room. Not because you should be afraid, but because awareness is powerful. Notice the details. Notice the objects. Notice the things you've stopped seeing. Because sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries begin with a simple question. What have I been overlooking? And once that question enters your mind, you may never look at ordinary objects the same way again. The question is no longer whether something can be hidden in plain sight. The real question is this. If something extraordinary was sitting right in front of you right now, would you even notice it? Most people immediately answer yes. Of course they would. Anyone would. But history tells a very different story. Because some of the strangest discoveries ever made happened only after months, years, or even decades of being completely overlooked. And that is exactly where our story continues. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning. You walk through your house exactly as you always do. You brush your teeth. Check your phone. Eat breakfast. Nothing feels unusual. Nothing feels dangerous. Everything appears normal. But what if normal is the very thing that keeps people from asking questions? The human brain loves routine. It loves patterns. It loves predictability. When something becomes part of your daily life, your mind stops analyzing it. It files it away as safe. Known. Unimportant. And once that happens, attention disappears. That's why magicians are so effective. They don't hide things because they're faster than you. They hide things because they control what you pay attention to. While you're focused on one hand, the secret happens somewhere else. Not because you're unintelligent, but because human attention has limits. And those limits create opportunities. Now let me tell you about one of the strangest observations made by investigators. In many cases involving hidden surveillance devices, people didn't discover them because they were searching. They discovered them by accident. A reflection. A misplaced object. A strange angle. A tiny inconsistency. Something that didn't quite belong. At first, it seemed meaningless. Then suddenly everything changed. That's the pattern. The clue is rarely dramatic. The clue is usually tiny. And that's what makes these stories so fascinating. Because they're really stories about observation. About awareness. About the moment when ordinary reality suddenly becomes extraordinary. Picture a room. A completely ordinary room. Nothing special. Nothing suspicious. Now imagine placing a single unusual detail inside that room. A detail so small that 99% of people would never notice it. Days pass. Weeks pass. Months pass. Nobody sees it. Then one person walks in. They stop. Look closer. And ask a question nobody else asked. That single question changes everything. Because awareness begins where assumptions end. And assumptions are powerful. People assume that if something dangerous exists, it will look dangerous. They assume secrets will announce themselves. They assume hidden things will appear obvious. But reality doesn't work that way. The biggest surprises often arrive disguised as ordinary moments. That is why some of the most shocking discoveries in history happened in places people considered completely safe. Places they trusted. Places they knew. Places they never questioned. And perhaps that's the most unsettling lesson of all. Not that hidden cameras exist. But that certainty can create blindness. The moment we become absolutely sure about something, we stop examining it. We stop noticing details. We stop asking questions. And when questions disappear, discoveries disappear too. Now I want to tell you about a strange psychological experiment. Participants entered a room and were told to memorize specific objects. Simple task. Nothing unusual. While they focused on memorizing those objects, researchers quietly changed other things around them. Large things. Obvious things. Things that should have been impossible to miss. Yet many participants never noticed. Their brains filtered out the information. Not because they couldn't see it. Because they weren't looking for it. That experiment revealed something remarkable. Attention is a spotlight. And whatever falls outside that spotlight can become practically invisible. Think about that for a moment. How much of your environment are you truly observing? 10%? 5%? Less? The answer may be far smaller than you imagine. And that's why hidden things can remain hidden for so long. Not because they're perfect, but because people rarely examine what they think they already understand. Now let's go deeper. Imagine an object you've owned for years. It sits in the same place every day. You pass it constantly. You barely notice it anymore. It's become part of the background. Part of the scenery. Part of normal life. Then one day someone asks you a simple question. When was the last time you really looked at it? Suddenly you realize you can't remember. You see it every day. Yet you haven't truly observed it in years. That realization alone is powerful. Because it reveals something about human nature. We don't just stop noticing objects. Sometimes we stop noticing possibilities. We stop questioning assumptions. We stop exploring mysteries. And that's when curiosity fades. But curiosity is important. Curiosity changes everything. Every major discovery began with curiosity. Every mystery solved started with curiosity. Every hidden truth uncovered started because someone refused to ignore a question. Now imagine a detective entering a room. The detective sees what everyone else sees. The same furniture. The same walls. The same objects. Yet somehow they notice something different. A detail. A pattern. A contradiction. A clue. The room hasn't changed. The observer has. That is the secret. Observation is a skill. And like every skill, it improves with practice. The more carefully you observe the world, the more details begin appearing. The more details appear, the more mysteries reveal themselves. And once that happens, ordinary life becomes far more interesting. Because suddenly every object has a story. Every detail has meaning. Every room contains questions waiting to be answered. Now here's the twist few people expect. The most valuable lesson from stories about hidden cameras isn't about cameras at all. It's about awareness. It's about paying attention. It's about refusing to drift through life on autopilot. Because the moment you become fully aware, the world changes. You notice things. Patterns. Connections. Opportunities. Warnings. Details. Things others walk past every day. And that awareness becomes a kind of superpower. Not because it makes you paranoid, but because it makes you present. Fully present. The truth is that most people spend their lives looking without seeing, hearing without listening, watching without observing. But every once in a while, someone chooses differently. Someone slows down. Someone asks questions. Someone notices what others miss. And that's when remarkable discoveries happen. Maybe not a hidden camera. Maybe not a secret device. But something equally important. A truth. An opportunity. A solution. An answer. Because hidden things exist everywhere. Not just in objects. In conversations. In situations. In relationships. In everyday life. And often the difference between confusion and clarity comes down to one thing. Attention. So tonight, remember this. The greatest mystery isn't hidden technology. The greatest mystery is how much of the world passes unnoticed every day. How many clues go unseen? How many details go ignored? How many answers sit directly in front of us while we're looking somewhere else? And perhaps the most surprising revelation of all is this. The moment you start paying attention, the world begins revealing things it was showing you all along. Not because reality changed. Because you did. And once that happens, once you truly learn to observe, you'll discover something incredible. The world is far stranger, far deeper, and far more fascinating than it first appears. And the next great discovery may be waiting in a place you've already looked 1,000 times, without ever truly seeing it.